Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tillicum Lelum Aboriginal Friendship Centre in my riding serves 12,000 urban Indigenous people. And they run on a meagre $139,000 core funding for the programs that they run. They're still running programs during this crisis, including a health centre, a youth safe house, youth and elder housing, a home for single moms, a food hamper for 150 families, family violence counselling, and addiction counselling. During normal times, they also run employment programs, adult basic education, daycare, youth programs, family programs, and meal programs, all with just $139,000 of core funding. They're an integral part of our local Indigenous community, and they're seriously struggling through this crisis. They are now one of the frontline organizations dealing with the COVID-19 crisis in my community. The government has allocated $15 million to friendship centres of the $305 million of relief funding allocated to First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and Indigenous organizations. This is out of a total of $180 billion relief fund. $180 billion, $305 million to Indigenous organizations. Will the government increase the relief funding and core funding, the relief funding and the core funding for the Aboriginal Friendship Centres serving the urban Indigenous populations across this country?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do want to highlight the incredible work that the member opposite has highlighted with respect to the Friendship Centre in his riding, and indeed the ones across Canada. They do amazing work with very limited funds. This is why, in part, in Budget 2019, this government invested $60 million in infrastructure supports over 5 years for these friendship centres that, again, do critical work for the vulnerable, the most vulnerable Indigenous communities in urban settings. And given that urban settings are at the core and are the target of the COVID-19 epidemic, these supports are incredibly needed right now. We have indeed received a submission from the National Friendship Centre Network. This is something we are working on at this time, and we will endeavour to get those funds out as quickly as possible because we know the need is real. We know they do so much with so little, and that need needs to be supported on a constant basis.